All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
It's Friday on the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Mo Kelly in for Mark on this fabulous Friday. We got so much to cover today. We have all sorts of video from Noem. We have to talk about the president and his executive order regarding AI, how he wants to make sure all of his tech buddies and cronies have no restrictions in their pursuit of AI dominance. Some people are calling it the new space race. It just might be. We'll get into that. Also, we'll be joined by Michael Schur, as we usually are on Fridays. And speaking of Fridays, it's Friday Fabulous Florida. We have some crazy stories Albert picked out, and I don't know which one you will love the best, but I know that you're going to love all three. And of course, we're going to close out with Michael Snyder. We're going to talk about all things entertainment and movies. But let me say good morning, good afternoon to you, Kim McAllister. Thank you so much.
Hi.
You are invaluable in so many ways in keeping this train on the track. And also, Albert, thank you for all that you do with our video. I was putting Albert through his paces not too long ago. I said, okay, I need this video. I need that video. I need this video queued up. We're going to have so much video for you. And as a matter of fact, since I got you right there, Albert, did you see, I know you saw Albert, but everyone else, did you see Noem as she was testifying on Capitol Hill, trying to fill in the gaps, if you will, for that oil tanker? Do you remember how we stole this oil tanker from Venezuela earlier this week? And there was no real explanation as to why. They asked the president, why did you do it? And he didn't really offer any type of acknowledgement as far as why we did it, just that we were probably going to keep the oil. And I was wondering, and I said it then earlier in the week, I said, did you notice how quickly we went from drugs to oil? But there was no connective tissue in between. We just know that we were in the region supposedly for drug interdiction. And then all of a sudden we ended up with an oil tanker and no one explained why. Well, that was until Secretary of Homeland Security, Noem, decided to, I would say, reverse engineer a reason, an excuse, an explanation, and then tried to tie the drugs that we never get to see with the oil that we know is actually there on the tanker. Check this out.
Time to talk about the Venezuelan situation and what the Coast Guard is doing.
The operation that was conducted yesterday morning was a Coast Guard-led operation. It was in partnership with the Department of War and the Department of Justice, the FBI as well, and it was a successful operation directed by the president to ensure that we're pushing back on a regime that is systematically covering and flooding our country with deadly drugs and killing our next generation of Americans. Just the drugs that the Coast Guard has been able to interdict on the waters since that President Trump has been in office has been enough lethal doses of cocaine to kill 177 million Americans. That's 2/3 of our country that has been saved by blowing up, by going after and bringing to justice these individuals that are out at sea and those individuals that are funding it with a shadow fleet of sanctioned oil that should never be sold to benefit their profits and their pockets of Americans.
Thank you for that. So, Kim, did I hear that correctly? So Venezuela is funding the drug trade with the oil. So therefore, we must confiscate the oil because that then keeps them from sending drugs to us?
See,
Ron Burgundy?
I thought that I was under the impression that the tanker was seized because it had something to do with Iranian oil funding terrorism.
Well, both things can be true. You know, it's like pick and choose your excuse, you know, because when they took the tanker, you would think they would have already known the reason in advance and they would have had that answer ready because obviously someone's going to ask the question, why did it's an oil tanker? And they didn't have an answer. And so they had to go back and then, you know, change what they call in movies retcon, change the continuity after the fact as far as what was happening and why. And that was the flimsy, lazy excuse which they came up with. And honestly, and this goes back to my cynicism, you can have lazy, flimsy excuses when that's all that's required, or that is sufficient to get you through the moment. There's going to be limited, if any, pushback on that excuse, even though we can all see how transparent it is. We all can see how nonsensical it is. You're saying that the Venezuelan government, let's be clear, we're not talking about a drug cartel. They are implicating the Venezuelan government, and that's a key distinction. Because when you're saying that the sovereign state of Venezuela is complicit and involved in this drug running, then now you're laying the pretext for the military involvement regarding Venezuela. They're trying to line up all these dots so they can say we had no choice, we had to go in. It's a part of our national interest and national security to protect Americans, 177 million, according to Christy Noem, from the scourge of drugs that we've yet to see. We've seen no evidence of any drug runners. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying they haven't shown us. They haven't shown Congress. They have not even briefed Congress. So how are we supposed to take them at their word when, again, and I've said this before and it bears mentioning again, they'll show us the videos of the oil tanker seizure. They will show us the videos of the missile strikes, or at least most of them, against these speedboats, fishing boats, however you want to characterize them. But they won't show us any of the underlying evidence, which supposedly is the legal predicate for any of this. The Coast Guard is involved, military intervention, but we can't see the actual evidence. We have a carrier fleet in the Caribbean, and they're not there cruising. They're there for a very specific reason, and it has to do with Venezuela. And they won't show us, they won't show you, they won't show any American, they won't show Congress the how, the why, the when, the what, or the who. They're saying, as the parlance on social media, just trust me, bro. Just take our word for it. Just assume that we're telling you the truth. We have all these capabilities of showing what we're doing as far as the seizure and the murdering of people, but we won't show you any of the underlying evidence. And if that doesn't scare the bejesus out of you, I don't know what to say. But there's something else. And that goes to the laziness and the flimsiness of these excuses. And I'm sticking with Christy Noem and her testimony on Capitol Hill for a moment, because she covered a wide range of issues, not only Venezuela, not only the oil tanker and interdiction, but also as it relates to immigration enforcement or illegal immigration enforcement. Now, this is something, and as I set up this clip, she is basically ambushed. I will say that she was ambushed with the presence via Zoom of a veteran who was deported or self-deported. Not exactly sure on that. There are conflicting reports, but an American veteran service member who was deported to Korea, his original country of birth, but wasn't living there since he was 7 years old. And this was done to surprise Noem. I'm going to play the video for you, and then I have some thoughts on the other side. Go ahead, Howard.
Madam Secretary, how many United States military veterans have you deported?
Sir, we have not deported U.S. citizens or military veterans.
I don't believe you served in the military. I haven't either, but I think you and I can agree that as Americans, we owe everything to those who have served our country in uniform, particularly those who have served in combat. Do you agree with that?
Sir, I believe that people that are in this United States that are citizens have legal status here.
Madam Secretary, we are joined on Zoom by a gentleman named Seizure Park. He is a United States Army combat veteran who was shot twice while serving our country in Panama in 1989. Like many veterans, he struggled with PTSD and substance abuse after his service. He was arrested in the 1990s for some minor drug offenses, nothing serious. He never hurt anyone besides himself, and he's been clean and sober for 14 years. He is a combat veteran, a Purple Heart recipient. He has sacrificed more for this country than most people ever have. Earlier this year, you deported him to Korea, a country he hasn't lived in since he was 7 years old. Will you join me in thanking Mr. Park for his service to our country?
Sir, I'm grateful for every single person that has served our country and follows our
And
laws.
can you please
and
tell
knows
Mr.
that our
Park
laws
why
are
you
important
deported
and
him?
every one of them needs to be enforced.
But you understand that many veterans struggle with PTSD, many veterans struggle with substance abuse challenges. This man took 2 bullets for our country. You have broad authority, by the way, as secretary, to issue humanitarian parole, to do deferred action. Will you commit to at least looking at Mr. Park's case to see if you can help him find a pathway back to this country that he sacrificed so much for?
I will absolutely look at his case, but I want you
Thank
to
you.
remember that
Madam
our
Secretary, the
programs
man
need to have
behind
integrity
you,
as
please
well.
stand up, sir. His name is Jim Brown from Troy, Missouri. He is a Navy combat veteran who served our country in the Gulf War. He's married to a woman named Donna, who came to our country legally from Ireland when she was 11 years old. She has lived here for 48 years. Because of you, Jim's wife, Donna, has been in prison for the last 4 months. She did not come here illegally, and she has never committed any crime other than writing 2 bad checks totaling $80 10 years ago. She is currently in prison and facing deportation. Ms. Noem, will you thank Mr. Brown for his service to our country?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your service to our
Now,
country.
what possible explanation can there be for locking up his wife for 4 months when she has committed no crime other than writing a couple of bad checks for $80?
Sir, it is not my prerogative, my latitude, or my job to pick and choose which laws in this country get
You
enforced.
have
and
broad
which ones
discretion
don't.
as the secretary.
We need to follow
You can issue
the law
parole, you
and
can do all
enforce
kinds
the
of things,
laws.
but you're choosing not to. Will you commit again to just reviewing Donna's case and reuniting this combat veteran with his beloved wife, who also loves this country?
I will review the case.
Yeah,
Now, Madam Secretary,
I have a few thoughts about that. It's interesting when the secretary says that she has to basically follow the law. She can't pick and choose which laws that she or the federal government is going to follow. And we know that that's categorically untrue. We can talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We can talk about any number of deportations where they just said, F the law, and just did what they wanted to do, regardless of a judge's ruling and regardless of what the law specifically said. So it's disingenuous. It's outright lie to suggest that they don't have either the latitude or the discretion as far as individual cases, or that their first and primary responsibility is following the law. That's one thing. But there's something else here, and this is a slight critique on the Democrats. I understand the need to expose hypocrisy. I understand a desire to either embarrass the Trump administration or highlight how far afield the Trump administration has gone with respect to disregarding our laws, our norms. But someone told me a long time ago, and it's very, very true, even today, and especially now in America, you can't shame the shameless. You can't belittle those who don't honestly feel that anything they're doing is wrong. And we are still, in a general sense, trying to live and work by the old rules where there, after a certain point, the hypocrisy would be too much and the Republican Party will come to its senses, or MAGA will realize that this is just wrong. It's not going to happen. The reason why President Trump does whatever he wants to do is because he has no sense of shame whatsoever. And Kristi Noem, as an agent and as a cabinet official, is acting in concert with the desires and wishes of someone who has absolutely zero shame. So bringing her up on Capitol Hill and trying to surprise her in a performative sense, let's be honest, let's be consistent here, let's not be hypocritical ourselves. If we're going to talk about Pete Hegseth being performative, let's call this what it is. It was being performative. It was a gotcha moment where you thought if you surprised her with not one, but two veterans and exposed some of the lies, that was going to make a difference. No, it's not going to make a damn bit of difference. Why? You may not have seen this if you're not watching us on YouTube right now, the Mark Thompson Show, or maybe you're just listening in your car. That clip came from C-SPAN. Kim, tell me, how many of MAGA actually watch C-SPAN? You're on mute.
I'm going to say 0%, Mo.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out there on the limb and say 0. I mean, I wouldn't think a lot of people in general watch C-SPAN, and I'm pretty sure, I can't confirm this, but I'm pretty sure that clip of Kristi Noem did not show up on Fox News anywhere. It did not show up on OAN, on American News. It did not show up on Newsmax. It did not show up in print in the New York Post. It did not show up in the Manosphere. Did not show up as a talking point with Steve Bannon or Joe Rogan or the more contemporary, quote unquote, traditional news sources of those on the far right. So there's this old phrase, old saying, like you're preaching to the choir. And I understand there's a need for that sometimes. You need to hear certain things or view certain things, which will make you feel better about circumstances. And I'm sure seeing Kristi Noem be embarrassed, or our formulation of embarrassed, probably felt good. It's like, see, we knew she was lying, or see, she got what she deserved. But it doesn't change anything, because Kristi Noem was only there in service of one person who can't be shamed, who has no desire to entertain any discussion of hypocrisy and is not moved by that. And that has been, honestly, President Trump's superpower. Think of all the things that you can do if you don't have any type of moral compass. Think of all the things that you do if you're not somehow constrained by ethics. Think about all the things that you might be willing to do or will do if you do not care about anyone outside of yourself and your own political interests. That's Donald Trump. And anyone who works for him, honestly, is already aware of who they're working for. And so although all of us reasonable people can say, oh, that was pretty embarrassing, Secretary Noem, you got your ass handed to you. We can say that. And objectively, it is true, but it doesn't move the meter. That's what I would want people to understand. And although that is one of the few tools that might be available to the Democrats, it doesn't mean anything. When you have Caroline Leavitt standing up there lying consistently, willingly, unconvincingly, and she follows a long history under Donald Trump of press secretaries who lie with impunity. I don't know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, what's his name from the very beginning? Sean Spicer. Couldn't remember his name for a second. So the lying has not stopped. If anything, it's increased in frequency. It's increased in its ridiculousness. So that nothing has moved the meter in that regard. So why would what you saw on C-SPAN in that moment have any impact either on Trump voters or Democratic left-leaning voters or even independent voters? Because I think it's been well established that they lie through their teeth. Well established. And it's been well established that regardless of all the videos of the abuses and violence as far as the supposed enforcement of illegal immigration, they don't care. And it can be very freeing in the sense of it will allow you to do things that customarily you wouldn't do. I'll give you a perfect example. Whenever I do anything on radio or TV, there's a limit. There's a limit as far as what I'm going to say. There's a limit as far as what I'm going to do. Because in the back of my mind, I know that my mother is watching. I know that my family's watching. I know that friends, people I respect are watching or listening. And I would never want them to think that I am capable of saying something that would be hurtful to her or to them or a group of people. That's why I never attack a group of people along ethnic lines. Now, I may attack someone along political lines, but I'm not going to point out specific ethnic groups because that's not who I am. And that's not how I was raised. In other words, I was raised with a sense of shame. I was raised with a sense of right and wrong, which is stronger than right and left. I was raised with the belief that there's certain things where you can say too much. You can go too far. You can stay too long and do so much wrong that it's irrevocable in nature. So I'm conscious of that. But I'm also conscious that we live in a time in which MAGA has none of that. And that's one of its chief selling points. And if you think that you can shame anyone in MAGA into either doing differently, doing better, or somehow dialing back the rhetoric and the vitriol and the hatred, then you've missed the point. You've completely missed the point. And that's Kristi Noem. And yes, they will try to embarrass her later on, or you'll see other clips, but it's not going to matter because you can't shame the shameless.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And also, did you see the video, switching gears, of the president signing this toothless executive action? And let me just break it down very quickly. He signed this executive action, which would absolve the tech bros, AI companies from having any limitations in the pursuit, research, implementation, or utilization of AI. And all that may seem bat guano crazy, it's actually in alignment with the Trump doctrine as far as helping all of his wealthy friends, because who would benefit from this? Big tech. Albert, let's see the video.
It's a massive industry. But one of the things that it has is you have to have a central source of approval. When they need approvals on things, they have to come to one source. They can't go to California, New York, and various other places. And there's only going to be, I think, one winner here. I don't know if anybody agrees with that. I think most people agree, but there's only going to be one winner here. And that's probably going to be the US or China. But people want to be in the United States and they want to do it here. And we have the big investment coming. But if they had to get 50 different approvals from 50 different states, you can forget it because it's not possible to do.
What we need is a single federal standard. And that's what the CEO says, sir, is it basically states that the policy of your administration is to create that federal framework. We're going to work with Congress, like the chairman here of the Commerce Committee, Senator Cruz, and other members of Congress to define that framework. In the meantime, the CEO gives your administration tools to push back on the most onerous and excessive state regulations. We're not going to push back on all of them. For example, kid safety, we're going to protect. We're not pushing back on that, but we're going to push back on the most onerous examples of state regulation.
That was deregulation before they could even get to the regulation. They want to make sure that there is no regulation that has to be deregulated. And there's something I do agree with what the president was saying. It in the way that President John F. Kennedy looked upon the space race having geopolitical implications as far as our status and place in the world. I think it is fair to say that AI will be the next race in that regard, where you do want the United States to come out on top, but I don't agree with the way that this is going to lead us to that end goal. I believe this is very dangerous. It is reckless, and it's being guided by greed and avarice more than it is good judgment. And you can talk about how AI fundamentally is going to lead to the loss of millions of jobs, but there are a lot of reasons why that was going to be inevitable, having nothing to do with AI per se, just automation more generally. But there is an ethical question about how we should proceed. There are obviously legal questions that the Trump administration doesn't even want asked, much less answered. They're saying we're not even going to deal with the legal implications of AI. We're just going to say it's wild, wild west. Do what you need to do. We're not going to bog down any of these tech companies with regulations or any type of oversight, which is another part to this. We're just going to let them do what they do. Now, I want you to look at this next clip. And this is from an ex-Google executive and AI ethicist. He's on Diary of a CEO podcast. And hear what he has to say.
Service jobs. If that got automated away, are we going to have OpenAI pay for all of the Philippines? Do you think that people in the US are going to prioritize that? So then you end up with the problem of you have law firms that are currently not wanting to hire junior lawyers because, well, the AI is way better than a junior lawyer who just graduated from law school. So you have two problems. You have the law student that just put in a ton of money and is in debt because they just got a law degree that now they can't get hired to pay off. And then you have law firms whose longevity depends on senior lawyers being trained from being a junior lawyer to a senior lawyer. What happens when you don't have junior lawyers that are actually learning on the job to become senior lawyers? You just have this sort of elite managerial class for each of these domains. So you lose intergenerational knowledge transmission.
Interesting.
And that creates a societal weakening in the social fabric.
I was watching some podcasts over the weekend with some successful billionaires who are working in AI, talking about how they now feel that we should forgive student loans.
Yeah.
And I think in part this is because of what's happened in New York with, was it Mamdani?
Yeah, Mamdani, yeah.
Mamdani's been elected, and they're concerned that socialism's on the rise because the entry-level junior people in the society are suppressed under student debt, but also now they're going to struggle to get jobs, which means they're going to be more socialist in their voting, which means a lot of people are going to lose power that want to keep power.
Yep, exactly. That's probably going to happen.
Okay. So their concern about suddenly alleviating student debt is in part because they're worried that society will get more socialist when the divide increases.
Which is a version of UBI, or just carrying, a safety net that covers everyone's basic needs. So relieving student debt is on the way to creating kind of universal basic need meeting, right?
Do you think the UBI, the universal basic income, has been long theorized? They've tested it in some cities. Albert, do you remember? I know they did it in Stockton at one point, and I know that they've done it in other cities.
Oakland.
The Bay Area.
Oakland as well.
Oakland, yes. And every time they did it, they had varying levels of great success. Let me put it that way. The assumption is they would give people like $1,000 a month to see how could they survive, would they survive, and more times than not, people were able to survive. It wasn't like they were disinclined to work, but after a certain point, you realize that there are not enough jobs for everyone. We in this capitalistic society are moving to that universal basic income. People may call it like they did. That was Tristan Harris, who you heard in that video, who's an AI ethicist and former Google executive. They can call it socialism, but it's really not socialism when it's an inevitability. I think of socialism as a choice, where this would be a necessity, because you will have an increasing number of Americans who simply will not be able to find jobs because the jobs will not be available. They use the example of a law student or a lawyer, but I just try to think of it in a much more fundamental sense. AI, at its minimum, is probably going to replace most minimum wage jobs.
Yeah.
Most minimum wage jobs. And if you do that, you're talking about removing probably the largest economic segment of the job market. And how would people enter the job market if there's a dearth or a lack of these minimum wage jobs? And so, well, you have then escalating unemployment skyrocketing over the period of, let's say, 3-4 years, because it would increase exponentially. More people out of work leads to more people out of work. More automation means fewer jobs, which means more people are out of work. What are you going to do about those people? And when we talk about in California, we don't like homelessness. Well, those people are going to be homeless because there won't be any jobs.
He was talking about who's going to pay for that universal basic income. Will tech companies pay for it? Because tech companies aren't going to be motivated to give up all the profits. And so then, you have this lack of money to pay people to not work. And it kind of weakens the fabric of our society, and we go downhill. And he ends up talking about how important it is that AI becomes, how some people have different voting issues that, are paramount to them. Mine might be Roe v. Wade, or abortion rights, women's reproductive rights, whatever it is that's your key hot button issue to you. He said to all of us, it should be AI, that we should be looking for politicians that are going to do right by us when it comes to AI, that it is now and will be in the future our most critical issue, and we just don't realize it yet.
It is that, but because of greed and profit motives and earnings calls and revenue projections, that's incompatible. It is, I think, unwise, illogical, and naive, not you, Kim, I'm saying for our country, to believe that we're going to progress first with the profit motive, because all these companies are thinking about money. If we look at the stock market, most of the gains have to do with the investment in AI infrastructure and development. It's not indicative and representative of our larger economy. Some would call that even a bubble. If it is a bubble and it does burst, then there goes our stock market and a lot of the gains, which impacts all sorts of individuals and families all across the nation. But also it speaks to this larger question of how our economy is going to survive long term, because we're talking about the interrelation of multiple economies, not just our economy. We're talking about jobs for people around the world, corporations, major multinational corporations. Let's just say, I'm going to just choose one off the top of my head. Let's say McDonald's. We know through automation and consolidation, they're trying to get rid of as many employees as possible. The fewer employees they have, like they have the kiosks. If you go to McDonald's, you don't see as many actual employees in McDonald's anymore. They have kiosks where you can key in your order, and you walk up and you can pay at the kiosk, and you walk up and they'll just hand you the food. Gone are the days where you have 4 or 5 registers of young people usually working behind the counter where you can make your order and some 7 or 8 people behind you actually cooking the food or microwaving the food, and someone is mopping the floor. You don't have 12 to 15 people working at a time in a McDonald's anymore. And part of that is because here in California, the fast food wages is up to $20-something an hour. So if I'm McDonald's, I need to get rid of as many employees as possible. I need more kiosks. Let's look into AI to see how we can further advance our technology and our food preparation, whatever, to limit our costs. Because if I'm McDonald's, if I have fewer employees, I have less payroll that I have to pay. I have fewer payroll taxes I have to pay. I don't have to worry about anyone going on vacation. I don't have to worry about benefits. I don't have to worry about someone calling in sick. I'll have people, quote unquote, working 24/7. And I don't have to worry about being sued by OSHA. That's a win for me as McDonald's or any other corporation. So you have to assume that corporations are approaching AI from the standpoint of increased profitability, not the ethical issues which may confront America 5 and 10 years from now. I think that's safe to say. And I picked on McDonald's, but that's true of any major corporation. You think you're going to walk into an Amazon or deal with Amazon and go to their warehouse and you're not going to see tons of automation? You think that their trucks and vans are not going to be automated, autonomous vehicles in 5 years or fewer? I mean, so the whole AI discussion will impact every single portion of our labor force, every single portion. Now, we can talk about it in advance, but unfortunately, and Kim, I would love to get your thoughts on this, I don't believe we're going to veer from this path until something disastrous would happen to slow us down.
There are companies in Silicon Valley working on AI where the CEOs get it and they know of the dangers and they know what could happen to the fabric of our world, to our humanity, to society. And they are actively, CEOs of some of these companies, pushing to slow this down. Slow it down, give us time as a people to catch up with regulations to make sure we're taking AI in the right direction. There are other companies that are full steam ahead, give me the money, let's do it. And I think the difference is, as consumers, knowing which companies. I won't use Chat GPT because I know that's not a company that cares, right?
Yes.
There
Yes.
are other companies that are a little bit more, there are other products out there that are a little bit more um, cognizant of what could happen. And so I think as consumers, we need to do some research and look into who we want to support as far as what AI is going to mean to us in the future. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
But the only backstop that we have, or the partition to protect us, would be the federal government. That's the whole point.
Mhm.
When I was talking about OSHA, that's the federal government protecting employees. If there is no protection mechanism in place,
Mhm.
either an overseeing body, some sort of legislative body, or some sort of laws to protect people from the Chat GPTs of the world,
Mhm.
the ones with questionable ethics in their approach.
Yep.
And, we're on our way to hell in a handbasket, because if we are subject to the whims of profit motivated companies, then the consumer always loses. Always. The whole idea to really connect this, and I know I'm jumping around, there's a reason why the federal government had to come in and implement 40-hour work weeks or 5-day work weeks. There's a reason. And part of that was to protect not only the American worker, but also to protect the consumer. If you don't have that same approach here, then it is just a wild, wild west. And then everyone is in danger. We haven't even scraped the surface about what AI can do, much less be able to control it if and when it gets to the point of singularity, where, and if you don't know, that means AI is smarter than the combined knowledge of all people on the earth, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying is it's going to grow at a rate that's further quicker than we can comprehend. Now, that's not saying there's going to be Skynet tomorrow and it's the Terminator and it's going to turn on us, but there will be thousands of unintended consequences on the way, because for the most part, we're walking in the dark and we're going to be bumping into furniture and worse.
I don't think we have any idea what's coming. That podcast, by the way, go check it out. It's fascinating to see what people that work in AI see coming, because they are understanding how this will impact us in ways that, we're asking the internet, what do you think of, some political issue, or, help me write this, or whatever it is, but we don't understand what's coming down the road and coming very quickly.
If we had at least a framework, an enforcement measure, some sort of protective hedge, that wouldn't solve everything, but it would help prevent some things. And what I mean by that is corporations, by and large, are of the mindset, we are not going to ask permission, we're only going to ask forgiveness. In other words, they're going to do what they want to do, what they feel is in their best financial interests. And if their hand should get slapped along the way, okay, we promise to do better. You can use a corporation like Wells Fargo, for example. How often have they gotten in trouble for the things that they were doing against the interests of the people who were banking with them, the fake accounts, the interest rates that they're only given certain communities, all those things. And what would happen is they get caught, they get their hands slapped, and they say, we promise to do better. That's with government oversight. That's with a Department of Justice who is actually looking for these things. But in terms of AI, there's no need to even ask permission. There's no need to even ask for forgiveness, because there's no framework in place to prevent against any type of abuses, which we know are coming our way. And that's what really scares me. It scares me because, one, I'm at a point in my life where I know just because of age alone, I'm imminently replaceable. Ageism is real. And there's also the fact that, because of technology, they already have AI, quote unquote, radio hosts in music. They have AI hosts in news and news anchors delivering news. They have AI reporters. I know, like, for example, Los Angeles Times and other print media, they have AI generated news reports after events, like maybe an earthquake. It automatically post a news report as if someone actually wrote it. So this is not something that's in the future. It's already here, and it's already eradicating jobs, and you may not even know about it.
You know, you talked earlier about having shame, and then we focus on AI and looking at companies that have no shame, right? As far as they're just out for the money. And I wonder, and how they can't be trusted in certain situations. And I wonder, when you look at politics, AI is a reflection of us, right? We trained it, we showed it what we want from it, we input humanity into it. And so when you have Trump and company sticking their fingers in AI, what do you get? Here's a story. Trump wants to make sure federal agencies don't use woke artificial intelligence. He says he wants AI systems to
What?
comply with truth-seeking and ideological neutrality. What does that mean? Does it mean we're not going to train AI to have ethics when it comes to how they refer to people or how it would treat people? Is that what we mean? So you be very careful who you let regulate AI. If Trump has, as I might think, pretty low morals to non-existent morals, then maybe he's not the guy I want in charge of regulating AI.
And also, let's not forget, if he phrases it as ideological neutrality, but in the expression of that ideological neutrality characterizes it as not being woke, you've already contradicted yourself, because you are using the verbiage and the lexicon of a specific political ideology and worldview in the description of what is supposedly neutral. And yes, Kim, if they are programming AI to have a certain worldview, which is genuinely not neutral and genuinely in alignment with a certain set of beliefs, and I honestly, I believe with any human involvement, there is going to be a degree of bias, but we're talking about intentional political bias to encourage a particular worldview and its expression through AI. So we're not talking about human fallibility. We're talking about intentional misdirection and pushing AI.
So they want it to prioritize historical accuracy and objectivity and have models that don't manipulate responses in favor of ideological dogmas. Well, what does that mean? Historical accuracy. Because I can tell you that my definition of history, my concept of what happened historically, is a lot different than Trump's, you know, who seems to want to recreate history and change all the plaques of the Smithsonian. So what does that do to AI? What I'm saying is, you know, you put a guy like Trump in charge and all of a sudden AI can't be woke, which means it has to lie to us now. And the minute you start putting that in place, we're in even worse trouble. I mean, it's enough. It's enough that, you know, we're looking at universal basic income and the loss of jobs and everything else. Now add that it's going to lie to us because the people that are in charge of regulating it want us to know only their thoughts, their ideas about what they want us to consume and think. This is dangerous to me.
You know, it's very dangerous. And AI doesn't create anything. It doesn't understand anything on its own in a vacuum. It's what data set is placed into it. If we program it to know only a limited certain things or to view certain things through a certain prism, you know, garbage in is garbage out.
Right.
And AI may have the capabilities of doing more than we can as humans. It's only as pure as what we put into it. And if we start off with impurities, knowing impurities, because and that goes back to what the president was saying as far as the future of AI and how he knows that China is trying to be on the forefront of it as well. And whereas I agree with him, it is the next space race, if you will. It's the next thing that countries are going to be jockeying so they can claim the next century as far as leadership, in the way that President John F. Kennedy thought that getting to the moon first was going to further solidify the United States as a world leader. I understand the importance, but I also understand the implication of what's going to happen when we get there. When we were just trying to go to the moon, that impacted very few people. AI impacts every person on the face of the earth, whether you're in a first world country or even an underdeveloped country. AI is going to fundamentally change how we interact with each other, how we may, or how our children are going to find a job or not find a job, and how we're going to exist and survive in the very near future. And with no guardrails, with no safety net, with no instruction, with no type of oversight, then that always ends horribly every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as the man on the podcast was saying, the AI ethicist, which I love that there is such a thing, an AI ethicist, and that companies like, Google are looking at that. As he was saying, the focus has to be, our focus must turn to looking for politicians that understand all of this.
Right.
That for multiple reasons, jobs, economy, ideology, all of these things, you have to now add AI into what you're looking for in political candidates.
I think that would be the right way to go about it. But if the past is prologue, that is not how we'll go about it. You may remember a few years ago when you had the tech CEOs testifying on Capitol Hill, and the relative yet collective ignorance of the members of Congress who are asking questions. They really didn't understand the basics of how social media networks worked, or how news was disseminated across these platforms, how political ads were used across these various social media platforms. The learning curve was so steep for members of Congress. I think it's going to be the same or similar here, where there's going to be all sorts of chaos and mayhem before Congress can even get in the race to try to catch up to wherever the rest of the world is. And that's what also concerns me. And Kim, I definitely want to go to the news in just a moment. But before we do that, and we're still waiting to see if we can get in touch with Michael Schur so he can join us on this Friday. But there was some other major news which broke, I would say, this morning, and it had to do with photos and condoms and pictures and Jeffrey Epstein.
What? The Mark Thompson Show.
Now, not everyone may know this, so this might be some breaking news for you, depending on when you woke up and when you pulled out your phone, whether you knew this was happening. But the Democrats, along with the Jeffrey Epstein estate, let me be clear, this is separate from the Jeffrey Epstein files that we're all waiting for. This is something completely different. The Democrats, in conjunction with the Jeffrey Epstein estate, had this tranche of documents and photos and memorabilia which were released to the public today. And it's going to take a long time for people to go through all of it because it's thousands of pieces. But most importantly, what's bubbling to the top, or what's going to get the most attention, are there a number of pictures of both Bill Clinton and Donald Trump individually in pictures with Jeffrey Epstein, and depending on the pictures, in the company of women. I say women because the faces have been redacted. I can't speculate as to the age of them, whether they were girls or women. I just know that the faces have been covered. Thank you very much, Albert.
Mm-hmm.
But what really should be the story is that there were pictures of what were seen as Trump condoms, Trump branded condoms, with the slug on it saying, "I'm huge." Yuck, 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 yuck. The reason I mentioned this, and I haven't seen any outlet pick up on this yet, and I think I have this right. The Trump condoms, and you can do this, your history research yourself, were not even created until 2015.
Oh, that's not a good look. Do they sell those alongside the Bible, Mo?
2015, Kim. Happen to remember that Donald Trump said that he had cut all contact and ended his friendship in the early 2000s, right? So why would Trump condoms end up as part of the memorabilia of the Jeffrey Epstein estate if they were created in 2015, some 9 years after Jeffrey Epstein was first indicted and arrested in Florida? That is a question I'm waiting for the mainstream media, whomever, to ask. How did these condoms get into a Jeffrey Epstein party when, in theory, you guys weren't even friends for at least 15 years?
And it's a big bowl of them too, with this big face on the package. Yeah, it's creepy. They lie. You know, the whole thing is he sits on a throne of lies, to quote Elf. He sits on a throne of lies and expects us to believe that, you know, any of this doesn't have his name and his involvement all over it. And we know it's not true. That's just silly.
Yeah, no, we know it's not true, but you still have to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
You still, even though Caroline Levitt is going to lie,
Yeah,
you still got to ask the question. If you're Caitlin Collins, it's like, Caroline, I see that there's some Trump condoms. They were in possession of Jeffrey Epstein. They were part of some party. If they were not friends for the preceding 15 years, and then we know that the condoms weren't even created to 2015, doesn't that suggest that there was some sort of ongoing rapport and that Donald Trump knew about the exploits of Jeffrey Epstein? That's the question you ask. You have to get it on record. You have to.
Yeah, you do. You have to. Yeah. And the questions, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they spin it. You know, Caroline Levitt up there with her cross around her neck, lying to the people.
Is it a smoking gun that Donald Trump was engaged in immoral criminal acts with underage girls? No, it's not that. The optics are pretty concerning, though, because you have then officially introduced the idea or the connection of sex and Jeffrey Epstein and parties and the ongoing rapport of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. In other words, it's less of a leap. You're still making a leap. We still don't know what's going to be coming out in the future, but it's less of a leap because now you're starting to see a sexualized understanding of Jeffrey Epstein in a party sense. Now, I don't know what the official Epstein files are going to lead to. I don't know if it's going to shock anyone. I don't know if it's going to be a big dud, a nothing burger as they describe it. I don't know about any of that. And I would caution people from getting out in front of it and say, if they release all the unredacted Jeffrey Epstein files, Donald Trump is going to be shown to be a pedophile. I don't say that. I don't necessarily believe that because you don't know what you don't know. And and I've always said, if it includes Bill Clinton or anyone else, there were pictures of Woody Allen, there are pictures of Steve Bannon and Richard Branson. And it doesn't mean that just because you hung out with Jeffrey Epstein that you participated in. But I don't know if you can hang out with Jeffrey Epstein multiple times over the course of years and not know about it, or at least the rumors of that portion of Jeffrey Epstein's life. And you damn sure can't claim ignorance after the year 2008.
No, you really can't. And I doubt that these party pictures will be the last ones we see.
If the Democrats are smart, and I say if there is some sort of smoking gun, they have it, they know about it, and they're sitting on it. And they're waiting for the full release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. I mean, there are times where the drip, drip, drip does help. You know, you don't want to do it too long because people say like, okay, there's just no there. You're just dragging this out. Sometimes you wait to play that ace until the right moment, until the moment where the president, just for political reasons, could be most vulnerable. like right before an election or something like that. I get the sense the Democrats are being measured right now.
I think people, and it's sucks that this is the way it is. People lose interest in a story as well.
True.
It's like they want that story to pay off. They don't have the longevity to follow it and follow it and follow it, right? So that eventually, when the big explosive information comes out, they've moved on somewhere else.
But see, you know, Karen reminds us that some 95,000 total images have been released. So we're only at the beginning of the dissection and analysis of what those 95,000 images could mean. But this is the way I look at it. If they release 95,000 images, that means the Epstein estate was meticulous in recording just about everything. When I say recording, memorializing every party, every gathering, in the way like you will see the White House photographer in just about every room with the president memorializing anything which happens in the White House. It seems something similar was being done with the Epstein estate, where they saved everything. And I'm quite sure not all of it is kosher, if you will. Not all of it is acceptable, if only because what? They recorded everything. And also, we haven't really seen the videos. We know that there's video evidence, if you will. We know that there's video of parties. We don't know everything about those videos. We're just getting these static images, and some of them are embarrassing. I wouldn't say they're damning, but you can start putting some of these puzzle pieces together. And, you know, and I hope journalists and news outlets are paying attention, because we are now officially being able to connect the idea of sex, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and a time frame. Because what hasn't been discussed, we got 95,000 images. I'm quite sure there's metadata. There's timestamp. You saw the picture of maybe Woody Allen and Richard Branson, for example. I'm quite sure there's accompanying information that says they had lunch on June 22nd, 2012, whatever, because that's what you do when you're you're an executor of an estate. All that stuff is logged. So there's far more information which is coming out that we don't even know just from these 95,000 images. And again, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what might be coming. But all that said, we have to temper our excitement and get not too ahead of ourselves. Don't get too far out on our skis, where we then miss the moment or mess it up. And then it turns into a true nothing burger, because not everything can be a huge revelation. So what was released today was not a huge revelation, but there are some details which are important to acknowledge and notate as more information comes in.
Comment from Cassandra, who says, "Oh Lordy, let there be tapes." I don't think
they're tapes.
There's some gross tapes, from what I understand. They're not going to show that to us because it's harder. I would say it's harder to redact tapes and like make sure that you protect everyone's information. And plus, some of it might be too, graphic, I think.
I would have to assume, given the level of agreed upon paranoia that Jeffrey Epstein had, given his interaction with some of the most important people in the world, given that we know that the estate had all sorts of photos and video, that there is probably an extensive library connected to his illicit activities. That's a reasonable assumption, because why? He chronicled everything. And a big part of his persona was his involvement with underage girls. So there has to be some level of memorialization of that portion of his life. And it's not that I want to see it. And let me just be honest with you. When I was sitting on a federal grand jury for 4 months, we unfortunately had to deal with child porn cases.
Oh no.
The first case we had, it was child porn. And they said, okay, we have these images, and they first described them to us. It shows a male 45 years old and an underage female of the age of 12 years old, and they described the act. Then they told us, if you require more, they didn't force us to, but if you required more of an understanding, they had the actual evidence, photographic and videographic evidence for you to review before we went into our deliberations. I declined. I'm just letting you know. You know, you can describe it to me. It's like, I got the picture. I got it.
Well, once you see it, it's like locked into your brain forever. I don't want that in there. I'm glad you didn't see it.
And I didn't want that. When it was described to me, the acts that were contained in the media, and the reason they do that is they don't want you as the jury to feel that you might be lied to or is an exaggeration. So they have to offer you the opportunity to review the actual evidence, which is described in the indictment, before you go into your deliberations.
Yeah.
And so we had deliberations like, okay, we got it. You know, true bill, indict the mother father.
Is there a line where MAGA lawmakers in Congress and the American public won't cross? I look at this from Scott Falcon, who says, it's a hypothetical, right? What if that allegations of sexual assault were somehow proven? It's still a Republican majority in the Senate and House, at least for now. He says he's not diminishing the ugly news, but would Trump still be president? That Republicans would need to flip. What's the thing that's so egregious? Because we already know this country doesn't really care about women, right? Doesn't care about the plight of women. We saw that from the grab them by the pee.
Yep.
You know, we see it all over the place. They don't care about women. But so where's the threshold for the American people where it's finally time to go, oh, okay, he's a bad guy?
I was trying to get to that with Jeffrey Katz yesterday.
David Katz, yeah.
Excuse me, David Katz.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking about the tipping point. You know, what was going to be where it was too much for the Republican Party? And I've been ruminating over that for many months now. And the only thing I can think of, and it's a very non-specific answer, is that the embarrassment for the somewhat sane Republicans would be too great. And this is just hypothetical. Let's say there was some sort of photographic or videographic evidence showing Donald Trump in a compromised position with a minor. And you can't explain it away. There are those, I would believe, who are in the Trump administration, like a Marco Rubio, who are somewhat sane and have a desire to have a future in politics, as opposed to Donald Trump, who's sunsetting in politics. He doesn't have a future beyond this term, who would choose their own self-preservation instead of trying to defend that, which has been the linchpin of QAnon and MAGA to a certain degree. I believe that if there was something that was incontrovertible, that would be the tipping point. But finding something that would be incontrovertible is almost impossible, Kim, because they would disbelieve it. They would call it AI. They would say that it was news. It was some sort of hoax by the Democrats. And to Donald Trump's credit, he's already primed the pump for his base to believe or disbelieve as Donald Trump, sees fit. So it would be a very high bar. But if they were to meet that bar, I think that would be the tipping point, because static photos of Trump condoms or standing and posing together at a party is not going to move the meter. Doesn't matter how real the pictures are. That's not going to move the meter. But there's a way that I think that the Democrats could be smart in framing it so people better understand the context and timing, given what the president has said prior to this.
So let me just lay this out. It's okay for him to be held liable for the sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll because she's not a minor, right?
Right.
It's okay for us to do nothing after a school full of 6-year-olds in Sandy Hook, or these kids are blown away. And yet somehow we're supposed to care about the sexual assault of a minor. So you see what I care about it very much so. But what I'm saying is, if we've allowed all these other things that, death of children, sexual assault, that he's found legally liable for, we already we're on this road already. So then we get to, oh, sexual assault of a minor. Is that really the line? Because look at all these other things that we've done that have shown that we don't care about kids or women.
No, you make great points, and it's hard to argue against it. The only thing I would say is, because MAGA and the extension of MAGA QAnon have made this so important that we even got to this point with the discharge petition. We know that it matters to some, even the Nancy Maces of the world, even the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world. So this particular issue has managed to cut through that none of the other ones that you've mentioned have. I can't necessarily explain it. You would think intellectually honest person would say, hey, if you're having kids getting gunned down in a classroom, that should be an issue which should move you emotionally. No, sir.
No.
But this has opened doors that heretofore were not ever going to be open. I never thought that we would get to the point where we'd have any type of Jeffrey Epstein disclosure, any of it. And to think that the Democrats, as the minority party, requiring the assistance, bipartisan support of the Republican Party, even a few members, was something that I could not foresee. And if I were a betting person, I'd say there's no way in hell, because there's no upside for the Republican Party. But as this comes out, there will be a politician, elected official here or there who cannot deny what's right in front of them. And because of the actions of Marjorie Taylor Greene, if I were to give her any credit, I believe it creates a permission structure for other people to get on board. If it becomes politically inexpedient, uncomfortable for an elected official to continue to support the president, if it gets really bad. Let's not forget, by all intents and purposes, for all intents and purposes, he is a lame duck. So there's really less of an upside to continue to hitch your wagon to the star of Donald Trump as we get further and further into his term, because there's little, what do we see in Miami? We saw that the word of Donald Trump is not the final word. It's not the be all. It's not the end all. It's not going to, he may, after a certain point, you realize that, wait a minute, Superman has found his kryptonite. He's no longer invulnerable. He's no longer the kingmaker that he once was. And maybe the threats of I'll primary you will not mean as much if this pattern should continue. I mean, this is all speculative. This is all kind of dependent upon what type of evidence would come out and how people would respond to it. But I firmly believe that every elected official and politician, first and foremost, is concerned with self-preservation in a contemporary and future sense. And the moment that Donald Trump becomes an albatross in a genuine sense and stops defying gravity in a political sense, then you will see certain members like the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world break away. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not going back, and I don't believe that she is the only one. I take her at her word as far as what people will say about him privately within the Republican Party. And if those voices get louder, or they feel more comfortable speaking out, then yeah, it's like chum in the water. You know, I guess if you feel that you're alone, and this kind of runs parallel to the whole idea of the Jeffrey Epstein saga, all these victims and survivors felt they were alone. But the moment they figured out and found out that, wait a minute, I'm not alone in this, and there are hundreds, potentially other victims still living who are willing to come forward, and you're fighting together, not individually, against these many billionaires. When I say many billionaires, I'm talking about Donald Trump, Elon Musk, who was also mentioned, Richard Branson. We're talking about the billionaire class. We're talking about some of the most powerful people in the world. And if you think that you're alone, of course you're not coming forward. If you think that you're one of the single solitary Republicans who may want to speak out against Donald Trump, and also by extension, his powerful friends who would also be implicated, that would probably give you pause. But if you know the, let's say 20 to 30 Republicans who feel the same way, who might want to speak out, that changes the equation. That changes the calculus. We're not there yet.
I look at what they're doing. You after the grab them by the pee, we saw, that's just locker room talk, right? And then we had the smoothing over of this, that's boys will be boys. That's just the way they talk, right? And I don't know if you saw, I don't know, about a month ago, maybe less, Megyn Kelly talking about how, Jeffrey Epstein can't possibly be a pedophile because he likes 15-year-old girls. That's way different than if they were, 9 or 10. There's a whole big difference there. Basically trying to smooth over, change the thinking of the fabric of America that somehow a teenage girl is able to consent to whatever happened with the, the folks in the Epstein world. So you see her laying the groundwork, but I can see that mindset being pushed forward where somehow then it becomes, well, look at, in different states, they can get, teenage girls can get married, and, they're not really, they're just kind of little women. And so it's not that big of a deal. Why you guys so worried about this? They're fine, right?
Something more sinister to it. When I hear those comments from Megyn Kelly trying to make this distinction between a pedophile and I think an evophile, or, it's not as bad as people want to make it out to be. I personally believe, and I don't have evidence to support this, but I personally believe it's being done with knowledge of certain evidence, stories, pictures, videos that are eventually going to come out.
Yeah.
And they're trying to prepare people for it so they'll be less shocked by it. For example, the whole idea of having military in cities for these ICE raids, it would have been unconscionable 6-7 months ago. Now we're almost accustomed to it because it's been happening day after day after day, and it's become the new normal. I get the sneaking suspicion that that's what's going on here. They're trying to get you used to the idea of these very rich men engaging in this criminal behavior, justifying it, minimizing it, somehow excusing it. So when it happens, they'll be less angry about it. And joining us right now is also political commentator Michael Schur, who I know is under a very, very tight schedule. So let's bring up Michael right now and get his thoughts on some of these issues this week. Michael, I know you're traveling. Thank you for coming out today.
Yeah, I am on the road mode. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you just fine.
Great.
So I'll do this because I know you have limited time. We had the Jeffrey Epstein, this latest dump of photos. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but I'll reset with you. There are still photos depicting Bill Clinton in a Jeffrey Epstein environment, Donald Trump in a Jeffrey Epstein environment with multiple women around him. The faces have been redacted and covered up. And there are also Trump condoms, branded condoms saying, "I'm huge," which were a featured portion of some Jeffrey Epstein party. I made the point that the Trump condoms weren't even created until 2015, which gives us a timeline to work with as far as Trump's quote-unquote severance of friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Have you had a chance to review any of this?
I haven't, and I've thrown out all of my Trump condoms, so I'm not a guilty guy right now. I think that, when we talk, Mo, is whatever else may be in there, there's one person.
Michael, I'm losing you. Well, okay, we just lost Michael. As you can tell, Michael was driving in his car, and we'll try to get him back, but he was so nice trying to accommodate us with his schedule right in the middle of traveling. So, Michael, you're
Let's
back.
try. We could try one more
Okay.
time right here.
Yeah,
All
Michael.
right, you got me. Okay, sorry guys. I don't know where I lost you, but what I'm saying basically is that there's only one person whose photo matters, and that's the sitting president of the United States. That's the sitting Republican president of the United States, and the people who are part of MAGA, who are part of that world, are the ones that are the most upset about the Jeffrey Epstein story. Not to say the Democrats aren't, but the ones that matter are his MAGA base, are Republicans in Congress, are people who just do not have the patience for this story. And as we're starting to see different things happen in Republican world around Donald Trump, whether it was Indiana rejecting the redistricting that they did yesterday, whether it was people peeling off from votes in the Senate on confirming some of the Trump nominees, you're starting to see people in this Republican president. It's happening now, and this isn't going to help.
We were basically making that point, Michael, before you came on, and Kim was asking about whether this makes a difference or whether there's a tipping point. And I was making the point that you're seeing these cracks, you're seeing this peel off where Donald Trump, the person, the politician, may become politically more harmful to other people's prospects. And I believe that some of the semi-sane Republicans like a Marco Rubio or some of those who have aspirations of a political career beyond the Trump administration will realize that the toxicity of all things Jeffrey Epstein may be just too much for any semi-sane elected official.
Well, it's not just elected official. I think tipping point is a perfect thing to say. It's a Republican elected official. It doesn't matter how many Democrats are incensed or disgusted or angry about what Epstein and Trump and their relationship may mean. It doesn't matter how much they will defend Bill Clinton. It has no effect on Donald Trump. What has an effect on Donald Trump are Republicans in Congress, people who have to vote for what he is doing, people who will maybe start pushing against him. They're the ones that are upset about this. They're the ones who have said that if any of this is true, if it is proven that Donald Trump has a relationship that he hid with Jeffrey Epstein, or there's more to it, there's more there, as it were, that's going to make the difference. Watergate didn't matter to Richard Nixon until Republicans started going against President Nixon at that time. To a degree, Joe Lieberman's speech in the Senate going against Bill Clinton during the impeachment over the Monica Lewinsky scandal, that's when it mattered most, because Democrats were starting to eat their own in that case. And if this happens with Donald Trump, who was already sort of entering lame duckness a bit early, if it continues to happen with his MAGA base, that's terrible news, not just for Trump, but for Republicans, because independents are not going to be happy about this either.
I know you've been traveling, so if you're not up on this story, there's no problem. But we know that the United States commandeered a Venezuelan oil tanker this week, and it's been very cloudy as far as the connection to the larger story of trying to stop the flow of drugs into America. I think that this is a part of this calculated escalation to a military conflict. Do you share that opinion?
You know, I don't know enough to say, not to say that I haven't heard about this story and read about it. I don't know enough to say whether it is a calculated ramp up that we're seeing bit by bit. I do think when you see the Epstein story coming out just after this, you know that there's a little bit of distraction that goes on, and distraction in politics always translates, or most often translates, to military action. Also, military action that isn't necessarily that devastating, right? I mean, it's something that, like commandeering a ship rather than going in and bombing. This kind of activity, I think, also may be a response on the part of the military, on the part of the Pentagon and the White House, to people who were criticizing the administration for going after small fishing boats. If there's really an issue with drugs that the administration is responding to here, then go after the big players. And this would translate as this is not just a fishing boat that they've commandeered. And again, the president and the White House still have to answer to the pardon of former President Hernandez in Honduras, because no matter what they do here, there is that kind of juxtaposition of the fact that they let if drugs are really the argument here, especially days after an opposition leader there gets the Nobel Peace Prize, if drugs are the crux of the argument here, then why are you letting a convicted drug criminal go, a massive criminal go? There are a lot of answers, but when they do these things, it does give the impression that they're fighting a bigger war with quotations around it than was believable before that.
Michael, sure, I know you're traveling, so let me just end with this question. We know that what's going on in Venezuela is one flank or one portion of the Trump doctrine. Another flank as it relates to illegal immigration and immigration enforcement here. We know that the Trump administration diverted some $2 billion to help fund this immigration enforcement effort. Is there anything that you're seeing where immigration is either losing its steam as far as being the political winner for Donald Trump, or is he going to further lean into it because of past success?
You know, I think they've sort of bought mode the idea that this is the way that they are going to win next year, is that they are going to fight against an issue that frankly was able to seduce enough independent voters to support it and be supportive of it, to elect him, to reelect him last year. So I don't see them straying from it. But what happens in politics is there becomes a balancing act, right? So if this Epstein story becomes bigger, if Republicans are on their heels because they're not extending healthcare subsidies, in that big mix, there's a lot less sympathy to or support for a president who's trying to push another initiative that enough people find tasteless. So there is a balancing act in politics. He comes in first 100 days, in this case, maybe the first several months, he's able to push through a lot of what he believed he was elected on in a mandate, which of course we know is not a mandate, but he can sell anything, whether it is or isn't happening. He was able to successfully do that to enough people. It's fine to do that. Presidents do that early on. But what happens is if other parts of their agenda or if other things start to impose themselves on that, it becomes disastrous for any president. And I think what you're seeing with healthcare and Republicans really scrambling to try and hang on to that issue, because that's an issue that hits people at home much more than anything else. I think that that's going to be something that may make it more difficult for the president to sell this. That doesn't mean they're not going to go with it. I mean, they're going law and order, they're going immigration, and they're not going to stop. They're ramping up in Minnesota with Somalians. They're trying to find, a boogeymen to go after in the absence of Nancy Pelosi. They're starting to go with the Squad and others, people that they can say, these are what the Democrats are. And if they're going to do that, that's their plan. I don't see them backing off of it. Well,
Michael Scher, I want to say thank you, because people may not know we have been going back and forth over the course of the last few days, trying to make sure we could get you in. You're a necessary part of the Mark Thompson Show every single week, and you bent over backwards to accommodate us and our viewers and listeners. So I say on behalf of Kim and Albert and Mark himself, thank you so much, my friend.
you got it. Thanks so much. I love doing it. See you later. Bye-bye.
Kim, look, you can verify for me. He actually jumped through a lot of hoops to join us today.
He just got off of an airplane. He was worried he wasn't going to make it because there was some kind of issue with them opening the door of the plane. And then he ran out, got into some kind of Uber or taxi. And then you wonder what the driver was thinking as he, he's talking about politics in the back seat. He's amazing. I'm just so grateful that he came and joined us. It's not Friday without him. So it's good. It's good.
Well, since it is Friday, I think we need to do some fabulous Friday news. But before that, we should have some news. Can
you want some news? I could do that.
Let's do some news.
All right. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. As Mo has been saying, House Democrats have released new photos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. 19 photos released in total today, with one showing President Trump with 6 women whose faces have been redacted. Others show Epstein with Steve Bannon, former President Clinton, director Woody Allen. Another photo showing Bill Gates with former Prince Andrew. One image shows a bowl of condoms, as we've been discussing, with Trump's face on them, but none of the photos feature any sexual misconduct or are said to have shown underage girls. The United States is announcing new sanctions aimed at Venezuela as tensions rise between the two countries. The sanctions target the three nephews of President Nicolas Maduro's wife, as well as 6 crude oil tankers and shipping companies linked to them. The move was announced yesterday following the seizure by the United States of what was described as a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. The United States Navy has submitted its review for Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. That, according to multiple reports, which they say entails potential punishments regarding Kelly's participation in this video of him and other Democratic lawmakers saying that service members can ignore illegal orders issued by the Trump administration. Are you going to punish someone for just saying something that's true? I mean, might as well just say, fact, right? Okay. President Trump himself called the video seditious. Kelly has previously stated he will not be intimidated. It's unclear what the potential punishments in that report could be, so we'll stay tuned for that. House of Representatives has overturned one of President Trump's executive orders, the House voting 231 to 195 yesterday to repeal an order that Trump signed in March ending union rights at federal agencies. The bipartisan measure would restore collective bargaining for nearly 1 million federal workers, the administration arguing restricting union rights was necessary to protect national security. The measure now has to pass the Republican-controlled Senate.
Hey, Kim?
Yes.
I would view that as another fissure, another crack.
Right.
Another peeling off, where it's not this unanimous, blind, sycophantic support of the president. Just want to put that in there.
I agree. Germany asking the United States to join a meeting next week to discuss a possible ceasefire in Ukraine. The meeting set to take place in Berlin, including Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and several other top European leaders. The German chancellor said whether the U.S. participates will depend on how negotiations go this weekend over a proposed peace plan with Russia. The Trump administration is looking to block Judge James Boasberg's planned contempt hearings next week and boot him from this case entirely. I guess trying to circle the wagons around Kristi Noem for making the decision to ignore the judge's order and let the planes fly to El Salvador.
I thought that they didn't have any latitude to pick and choose the laws that they were going to follow. She said that. We played the video.
The attempt escalates the administration's long-running feud with Judge Boasberg over his handling of this case, stemming from Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act as part of his sweeping immigration crackdown. According to the Justice Department, Judge Boasberg has created a strong appearance that the district judge is engaged in a pattern of retaliation and harassment and has developed too strong a bias to preside over this matter impartially. Testimony from the hearing is expected to inform Boasberg as he considers referring Trump administration officials for criminal contempt after violating his order. ICE cannot rearrest Kilmar Abrego Garcia. A federal judge blocked the Trump administration from holding Garcia during a scheduled check-in today. Abrego Garcia, who Homeland Security says is a, quote, illegal immigrant and gang member, has been fighting deportation attempts for months. The Justice Department is expected to appeal yesterday's decision. California is suing the Trump administration, challenging its $100,000 fee for new H-1B visas. Democratic Attorney General Rob Bonta announcing the suit this morning, saying the state is leading a coalition of 19 states in filing it. Employers, they say, have been required to pay the 6-figure sponsorship fee since September, on top of already required visa application fees ranging from $9,500 to $18,000. The visas allow skilled and credentialed workers from foreign countries to stay in the United States, and Bonta says the large fee impacts education and healthcare already dealing with labor shortages. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is praising a setback to Republican redistricting efforts in Indiana. Jeffries says it's a good night for the American people and a bad day for Donald Trump after Indiana's Senate state Senate rejected a new GOP-favored House map in a 19-31 vote. The New York congressman making an appearance on MS Now's The Briefing, saying the GOP has been a disaster, while also suggesting the party has nothing positive to present to the American people. The outcome of that vote came despite threats from President Trump to support primary challenges to Republicans that push back on redistricting. In the San Francisco Bay Area, a violent home explosion left 6 people hurt, and it was all caught on tape as well. Not sure if Albert has the video, but this happened yesterday at a home in the Hayward area in the East Bay, where utility crews had already shut off the flow of gas. Alameda County Fire Department says crews were dispatched to the home before the explosion for reports of a natural gas leak. Oh, you can see that blast right there. And the gas was shut off before the explosion. Still, kablooey. Look at that. 6 people hurt and taken to the hospital.
Did you see the person who was running from the house on the left? Now watch just to the left. Yes, Albert. Yeah, you're highlighting the person that's running is like, I don't know how you survived the blast being that close to it.
Well, I would imagine people were standing right in front of that house as well. Yeah. Crazy. I will say President Trump will be honoring the miracle on ice in USA Hockey at the White House. He'll sign a bill to award the 1980 Olympic gold medal winning team congressional medals. Captain Mike Urazzoni, the goaltender Jim Craig, and forward Buzz Schneider are expected to attend the ceremony that will take place in the Oval Office.
I remember that well. I was in 5th grade, and my 5th grade teacher, Ms. Travers, back when they rolled out the TV. They rolled out the TV. It was tape delayed, but we didn't know that at that time. Watching the Olympics and people forget that game in which we defeated the Soviet Union was not the gold medal game. It was the semifinals. They still had to win one other game, but it was when I really fell in love with the Olympics. And I remember that they had Mike Urazzoni, who was the goaltender. It was a wonderful moment. So I'm not going to hate on the president for this one. Not at all.
I think you said his name much better than I did. Lastly, Bud Light is using snow from the Highmark Stadium, home of the Buffalo Bills, to brew a limited edition beer. I don't know if I want to be drinking snow collected from around the stadium.
No,
Bud Light they're marketing it as Blizzard Brew. The snow used in the brew was collected after the first snowfall of the season last month. The Blizzard Brew will be sold in 16-ounce cans and available at retailers in the Buffalo area. It'll also be available for the Bills' January 4th game against the New York Jets, which is their final home game of the season. I don't know about that.
Be willing to bet my lunch that there's alcohol involved.
Yeah, I don't know. What kind of snow? Where is it? Where exactly did they collect that snow?
I know, it was on the ground.
Yeah.
And who knows what was in the snow, but it was on the ground.
This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Ooh, I'm telling you, I've got my tea today, and it's just making life better. I'm just loving it. You've got the holiday gift sets they have on the website, the holiday blend coffee, all of these things from the teas to the coffees to the spices make excellent holiday gifts. And then pick up a little something for yourself too. There are tasting notes that'll tell you exactly what you're going to order before you order it. So you can make sure, do you like a dark roast? Do you like a light roast? Maybe a more middle of the road? Check out the beans. You see the beans will tell you exactly what the roast is, and the tasting notes are there too. So you can see if it's something you're interested in. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. That is the website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Kick around there, and if you see anything that interests you and it ends up in your online cart, please use our super secret code MARKT at checkout. MARKT, no spaces. That'll get you 10% off your total. Our thanks to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. As Mark says, the best coffee that has ever gone past his lips, and I completely concur with the tea as well. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
A little late to it, and some in the chat were asking about it, whether we were going to get to Friday Fabulous Florida. Yes, we are. It's just going to be quick. Let's do it, Albert.
It's time for Friday Fabulous Florida.
There is a gigantic alligator in my kitchen.
A look at the weirdest stories from our weirdest state.
And here we go. A Florida man was accused of stealing a BMW convertible and also crashing it at high speed. But when he was arrested by the deputies, he said he had teleported into the car.
What?
Teleported into the stolen car. Because the car, I guess, was stolen by someone else. And so look, you could teleport me into Kim's house. It doesn't mean that. Anyhow, 36-year-old Calvin Curtis Johnson was found with a bloody face after the wreck. And the deputies asked him how he ended up in the car. He said he had teleported. And my thing is, if you say that you teleported into the car, then you should be able to teleport your ass out of the arrest. I'm just.
I don't know. Did they test him for meth? Because I'm thinking perhaps there was alcohol involved or perhaps methamphetamines involved. I don't know.
Well, according to deputies and other witnesses, he kept asking for a light. And it's like, well, why does he need a light? Never mind. As they say, don't try to mix this nonsense.
Like,
I'm hoping there's some audio. There's some audio to this. I think of him saying that he teleported.
Where'd you get the car from?
I don't know. It's Calvin. I don't know. I teleported.
Officer, where'd you mark? You fired soon.
Come over here. Give me just one second.
Yeah.
Put your hands up on my car. Yes, sir. I teleported.
Officer, where'd you mark? You fired soon.
Come over here. Give me just one second.
Yeah.
Put your hands up on my car. Yes, sir.
That's 36-year-old Calvin Johnson with the bloody face. And you heard him right. He told the deputy he teleported into a stolen car and crashed it.
Signal 20 says. Oh my God. He stole the car.
This started at Bicentennial Park in Ormond Beach. A man walking his dog left the keys of his BMW convertible in the car, and deputies say a thief jumped on the opportunity. A witness describes the strange interaction he had with the suspect.
Who'd you see get into it?
It was a guy probably maybe 30 years old. It wasn't his car.
No.
He kept asking for a light, and I was like, how in the world does he have a BMW if he doesn't have a light for a cigarette?
A few minutes later, this happens.
130 miles an hour, and I swear to God, that's his vote.
The stolen BMW crashes at Old Dixie Highway and Plantation Oaks Boulevard. Good Samaritans stop to help.
Cut him out of his seat.
It's not his.
And then everyone learns the car is stolen.
You saved me from the aliens.
After the deputy puts out the lingering fire, the suspect is driven, not teleported, to the hospital and then to jail.
That's funny.
He also said, "You saved me from the aliens," is what he has said. So he teleported and he was saved from the aliens.
Yeah. Only in Florida. Let's
take
it
all kinds.
Let me tell you about this elderly Florida man who was rescued by cops after slipping on his roof. You think, well, why was he on his roof? He was blowing leaves off of his roof. And I know, Albert, there is a video to this. So let's see if we can bring it up real quick so people can see this man, because there is body cam footage. There we go.
Is there sound? Oh, he's hanging on.
Yeah.
All right, once. Here. Now reach up.
Pull this man up onto the roof. The ground.
Look at your wrist. Come here. Okay. Give me your wrist.
You got it. I didn't mean to cause all this.
No. It's not your fault at all. That's what we're here for, okay?
No, it's his fault.
You got here very quickly.
That's what we tried to do. Yes, sir.
You do a good job.
Yeah, no, it's his fault. And I'm not going to blame him in the sense of that he was doing. Well, let me just put it this way. After a certain age, you shouldn't be on the roof. I'm not getting on my roof for that reason. Now, I don't know if he was somehow cognitively incapacitated or dealing with any type of those issues. If you look at him, it's a question that I would have, why he would even be on the roof trying to blow off leaves. But at least it's a story in which it did not end with a death or serious injury. So I can't.
Exactly. Poor guy. They said he was steadily slipping on the tiles. Slip, slip, slip. So the officers got there just in time.
Just in time, and found some way to get up on the roof to be, because I don't know how long he was there. And I guess someone saw him maybe crying out and called the police.
Mm-hmm.
But MoFlo 99 says, did he teleport to the roof? There you go. We got time for one more, and then we'll find out which is your favorite story, Florida story for this week. Let me tell you about this woman who exposed herself.
Nudity.
Look, Florida nudity. Exposed herself on the sidewalk, and it says, while drinking liquor. Well, why else would you expose yourself unless you're drunk or high or both? And as it turns out, she's 37 years old, and the police observed her walking on the sidewalk, and they noted in the arrest report that the woman's underwear was around her knees, exposing her privates, both front and back.
Oh, come on.
And we have the mugshot up right now. I mean, I guess if she bathed and combed her hair, she wouldn't be too unattractive, whatever it's worth.
It looks like she's had a rough day.
Oh, yeah. And it did not end well. It said that she was actively drinking from a liquor bottle that was wrapped in a plastic bag. All stereotypes noted. The officer made contact with Jones and seized the bottle of Flashpoint. I guess that's a brand I'm not familiar with. And observed the approximately 75% of the liquid had already been consumed. Of course, because she was stumbling naked ass drunk. And she obviously became combative because she was naked and drunk and in Florida. So there you go. I don't know what. Look, the teleportation story is going to be hard to beat. Hard to beat, because that's something. Stolen car happens all the time. Crash a stolen car happens all the time. But teleportation as the reason, that never happens. So let us know your favorite. And Albert, we'll have a poll up for you to choose between.
We're running a little short on time, so I'm gonna
then
no poll this week. But let me just see who. A lot of people love the teleportation. I think that's the obvious vote this week.
One.
Yeah, that's my vote. I mean, how can you? That's so Florida. You know, the teleportation and Saved by Aliens. Yeah, gotta be.
I like how they buried that lead too. Like they didn't even say that he got saved from aliens until we looked a little more into the story.
And there you have Friday, Fabulous Florida.
This has been Friday, Fabulous Florida.
There is a gigantic alligator in my kitchen.
Y'all come back now here.
Very quickly, before we get to Michael Snyder, Kim, let's shout out some of the people who have been supporting us today, because it's necessary. We appreciate when you click like, when you subscribe, when you share the Mark Thompson Show. Remember, it's because of your contributions, your support, and your word of mouth that the Mark Thompson Show continues, and we have so much fun doing it. Go ahead, Kim.
Richard Delamater with a couple says, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll kiss your butt goodbye on the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you, Richard. You're awesome. Citizen Morgan with $5. Thank you for throwing that in. Much needed, and we appreciate it. Tony Ladotti with 5 says, hey guys, what about Putin calling Maduro? Do you think that could finally cause a rift between Trump and Putin and be good for Ukraine?
No, because Trump is a supplicant. So whatever Putin does is okay. He'll find a way to justify it.
Wes is warm for 5. Teleportation equals winner. Old man equals sad. Woman equals typical for Florida. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone for the contributions to the show. Find us at themarkthompsonshow.com, themarkthompsonshow.com, the Patreon, the PayPal links there. And super chats are always open, even after the show in so-called after-hours trading.
Thank you.
In the comment section, you can always leave us a little something, and it's what keeps the show rolling.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hey, Albert. Albert, is the culture blaster Michael Snyder here with us yet?
Yeah, he's here. He's standing by.
Okay, let's get to it as we close out the show and the week. Michael Snyder, my new best friend, as we talk about all things.
Movies, TV, nightlife. Man, I cover the waterfront. Hey, Kim, Albert, Remarkables, and Mr. Mo Kelly. It's always a bonus to get Mo Kelly on the stream. That said, it'll be nice to get Mark Thompson back in the middle of the holiday season, even though he pulled a Ted Cruz and took off for Mexico instead of dealing with the ongoing national emergency that's roiling the U.S. We will forgive you, Mark, and hope you're having a good time down south. Mo, I saw that clip of administration quizzling Kristi Noem lying and dodging culpability during the congressional hearing. I wonder how her family puts up with this embarrassment. I mean, even my garden gnome is disavowing her. I mean, no one wants anything to do with this woman at this point.
You know, we haven't seen much from her husband because there's been growing speculation of some sort of illicit affair with Corey Lewandowski. Her family has been largely absent. That's something that I've noticed.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's all pretty ridiculous in Washington, D.C. In fact, I just got word that Trump is trying to use the Alien Enemies Act to ban the latest Avatar sequel. Is that true? I'm not really sure about that.
Well, we live in a time where everything seems so unbelievable and is believable that it just might be true.
Yeah, it's nuts. Well, speaking of the Avatar sequel, which is coming out next week, let's talk about movies. What do you say?
Let's get into it.
Okay. Written and directed by no less than James L. Brooks of Broadcast News, Terms of Endearment, and Simpsons fame, Ella McKay is a comedy with a purportedly feminist perspective concerning an earnest female lieutenant governor in a middle American state who's put in charge of the state when the governor is tapped for a cabinet position in D.C. And I got to say, it's a major disappointment, Ella McKay, considering all of the talent involved, especially the woman playing the title character, who is the charming and versatile Anglo-French actress Emma Mackey, who you may know from the Netflix series Sex Education, and she was Gustave Eiffel's the love of his life in the French biopic Eiffel. She speaks fluent English with a variety of accents. You wouldn't guess she is an American in here, and she also speaks fluent French. In any case, you also have a very starry group of supporting players. Jamie Lee Curtis plays Ella's caring aunt. Woody Harrelson is Ella's, I guess you'd call him a ne'er-do-well father. Rebecca Hall is Ella's mother. Jack Loudon from Slow Horses is Ella's questionable love interest. Io Adebari from The Bear is the ex-girlfriend of Ella's nerdy brother. Julie Kavner, the voice of Marge Simpson, looking rather careworn here, is Ella's devoted secretary. Kumail Nanjiani is Ella's driver and bodyguard, and seemingly out of retirement for his buddy James L. Brooks, the comedy legend Albert Brooks, no relation, plays Ella's political mentor, the governor. I say this because, alas, Ella McKay is not funny or in any way astute about politics, family conflict. I don't buy the romance, and I don't buy the way they approach the challenges that women face when offered or pursuing power. The characters are kind of cardboard. They're thinly drawn or cliched, and none of the efforts of the actors can salvage the shortcomings of the script. And you know what? That's on James L. Brooks, who wrote this thing, and he still has things moving along at a jaunty clip as a director. But meanwhile, I mean, Rebecca Hall, Io Adebari, and Kumail Nanjiani are given so little to do, they could have actually been played by cardboard cutouts. Mackey, who manages to be appealing in an unappealing part, is almost the only actor here who rises above the material. It gives me no great joy to say this, especially since I was rooting for Mackey to get the sort of showcase she deserves. I wouldn't vote that you go see Ella McKay. Anyway, it's in theaters. Kim, I know this is the sort of movie that would appeal to you, but it just didn't cut the mustard, man.
I'm going to trust you on it.
Okay, now something that I adored, and despite the violence, I think, well, teenagers could get a kick out of it, and grown-ups too. That would be the Dust Bunny movie. And that's right, a movie called Dust Bunny. It is whimsical and visually dazzling, and I just ate it up like, like figgy pudding on Christmas Eve. Anyway, Aurora is an orphaned 10-year-old who is terrified by something lurking under her bed. So she does what most kids would do in this situation. She asks for help from her surly, secretive neighbor who just happens to be an accomplished hitman. This dark fantasy and adventure with assassins, government agents of questionable virtue. I mean, are there any other kind? Parents that might not have a child's best interest at heart, and the proverbial creature under the bed providing more than a touch of horror is just a trip. The cinematography is vivid with colors that pop and camera angles that are kind of thrilling. The sweetly sad-eyed newcomer, Sophie Sloane, plays Aurora, and the Titanic Scandinavian actor, a terrific leading man, a terrific villain, great at everything he does. Mads Mikkelsen plays the hitman, and the chemistry between Sloane and Mikkelsen is awesome. And you also get the ever wonderful Sigourney Weaver, who, by the way, she's on a bit of a roll. She has the new Avatar movie coming out next week. She plays a Black Ops mastermind, and David Dasmalchian, who I loved in Late Night with the Devil, a terrific character actor and a guy who knows how to handle comedy. He plays one of the main agents after the girl and the hitman for one reason or another. Amazingly, this is the first feature film from director and screenwriter Brian Fuller. This guy created Pushing Daisies, Hannibal, wherein he worked with Mads Mikkelsen, and Wonderfalls. He was the showrunner for the first season or two of American Gods. He was a writer on Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, co-created Star Trek Discovery. He has made a lovely film for his debut as a feature film writer and director. By the way, there's music from Isabella Summers, who was the so-called Machine from Florence and the Machine. I really enjoyed Dust Bunny. It is in select theaters, and I think it's going to really play well at home. So after Emma Mackey, gets screwed, you got this wonderful and delightful film in Dust Bunny. So moving on, let's get to Rosemead, which has a Los Angeles hook to it. Powerful and very, very painful. Rosemead is a drama based on real people and true events, this time set a few years ago in LA's San Gabriel Valley area. It features a tremendous and honestly soul-crushing performance from Lucy Liu, who convincingly plays against her glamorous but tough image. The Alhambra and Monterey Park townships of the San Gabriel Valley are home to a large Asian American population with a large contingent of Chinese immigrants and, not surprisingly, great dim sum restaurants. And this is the setting. Liu plays Taiwanese widow Irene, who suffers from extremely daunting health problems and is trying her best to support her psychologically troubled teenage son. And tragedy unfolds. The situation is brutally sad, but your heart goes out to Irene, the mom, and Joe, the kid, over and over again. Despite its female lead being in dire straits and its factual inspiration, it is definitely not what one would find on the Lifetime channel. Is there a Death Time channel? Maybe this would fit there. Anyway, Rosemead, which is directed by Eric Lin and written by Marilyn Fu, is what I would designate as difficult viewing. And that said, Liu is fantastic, and the movie as a whole is very well done. If you don't mind sometimes being shattered by what you see on screen, I recommend Rosemead. It is in select theaters. Let's move on to something a little different than Rosemead. I mean, honestly, this couldn't be more different. It's called Silent Night, Deadly Night, and it is a diverting, low-budget, and seriously gory remake of the 1984 Christmastime horror movie of the same name, wherein a serial killer dresses as Santa Claus to deliver the sort of present you never want to get. So this was okay for what it is, and apparently it's the latest in a long series of remakes of this idea, again, since the 1984 movie. And a young child is horrified at Christmas to see someone dressed in a Santa suit coming after him And I was completely blown away by what happens in this particular situation. The kid has to witness his parents dying at the hands of this horrible person in a Santa suit, and then kind of gets infected with whatever it is that drove this Santa to do the killings, and then spends the rest of his life seeking out people that deserve to be killed around Christmas time, even as an, what do you call those things, an advent calendar.
Yes.
For each day before Christmas that he takes somebody out. It's really pretty brutal, man. And, I mean, for what it was, I'll be honest with you, I was entertained, but it is not what we would call great filmmaking. I will point out something intriguing here. The female lead is played by Ruby Modine, daughter of Matthew Modine, most recently killing it, so to speak, as the villainous creep running the twisted government lab in Stranger Things. And she has a lot of charisma. It's intriguing to see her up there. Yet another legacy actress, but she does a good job in terms of what she's asked to do. And there are funny moments, written and directed by Mike P. Nelson, not to be confused with the guy from Mystery Science Theater 3000. Let's double back for a second. And I have another based on a true story movie, and this one is really good. And it's having what we would call an Oscar qualifying run in New York and Los Angeles this week, starting today, and it's called Dead Man's Wire. This is based on a true story, again, and directed by the estimable Gus Van Sant, and it concerns the 1977 Indianapolis kidnapping by a guy named Tony Kuritzis of his bank mortgager, Richard Hall, who is the president of the Meridian Mortgage Company. Kuritzis had fallen behind on mortgage payments for a piece of real estate, and the banker refused to extend his time for payment. So Kuritzis shows up at the bank and takes Hall hostage using a sawed-off shotgun that is wired with a, quote, dead man's wire, end quote, thus the title, from the trigger to Tony's own neck. And he then requested hostage money and an apology. This thing is driven forward by a seriously compelling performance by Bill Skarsgård, one of the Skarsgård acting clan. He's the guy who plays Pennywise in the current Stephen King It projects. And it also features Al Pacino as the banker's father, who is the power behind the bank, Coleman Domingo as a local radio personality that Kuritzis trusts, Dacker Montgomery as the Richard Hall guy, the banker, and Carrie Elwes as Detective Michael Grable. This has got a lean and mean script by Austin Kolodny. Skarsgård doesn't really look like the real Tony Kuritzis, but he's so good in the role that it doesn't matter. You know, here and there, this evoked the classic 1970s true life crime drama, Dog Day Afternoon. And I can't help thinking, I got a feeling this was willful, Mo, but it was smart on. You were saying?
I was saying with Al Pacino, that was the first thing that came to mind of whether there was any certain subtle connection to Dog Day Afternoon.
Yeah, I would say so. And it was smart on Van Zant's part. You know, there is a certain righteous anger on the part of Kuritzis that really strikes a chord in these economically turbulent times. You know, there's a few smug haves and so many have-nots. So it resonates, you know? Anyway, like I said, it's starting a brief Oscar qualifying run. It's in New York and Los Angeles this week, but it was very good. It will, by the way, open in January, first limited and then wide release. But it was so good and worth highlighting for those able to see it now. And we do have a pretty considerable listenership in Los Angeles. Dead Man's Wire. I thought it was quite good. Let's wrap things up with One More Shot, which was primarily set at an upscale-ish house party in Australia on New Year's Eve 1999. So One More Shot is a very lightweight time loop rom-com that gets a bit rough here and there, but does benefit from the winsome Emily Browning in the lead, and you may recognize her from Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events or Sucker Punch. It also has Ashley Zuckerman, who was in the cable TV drama about the Manhattan Project called Manhattan. And essentially, her character, Browning's character, shows up at the party, and her ex is finally back in town, and she's going to maybe reconnect with the guy. And she has a bottle of tequila that was imported by friends from Mexico, and she takes a swig for courage. And this tequila keeps thrusting her back in time to when she had the first sip of the drink, as she stood at the door of the party and was greeted by her ex. And she keeps trying to fix their relationship over the course of the movie. And, I enjoyed this film, and it was, kind of creative in a way. We're familiar with these time loop movies. And as comedies go, it's pretty decent. There's some kind of violent slapstick here and there. But I didn't think it was bad. One More Shot is streaming on the usual video on demand platforms. And I guess that wraps things up for the movies, Mo.
I have to say, this is not only an eclectic list, but you took me high, you brought me low. When you talked about Ella McKay, you said James L. Brooks, it's like, yes, I want to see that. One of my favorite movies of all time is Broadcast News. It's part of the reason why I work in entertainment today, specifically because of that movie. Wow. And there's a line in it. And you probably know about, what do you do when your reality exceeds your dreams? And I always pondered that question, because I believe my reality has exceeded my dreams. And I take that back to Broadcast News. So when you said that Ella McKay was a major disappointment with cardboard and cliche characters, it broke my heart. Michael, it broke my heart.
I'm sorry, dude. I did offer you some decent alternatives, though, did I not?
Yes, you did. You talked about Dust Bunny, which was whimsical, visually dazzling, great cinematography. And you could have just started with Mads Mikkelsen, and I would have been there, because whatever he's doing, especially if he's an anti-hero or a villain, it just works wonderfully for me. I think his best performance, correct me if I'm wrong, was maybe when he was in the Daniel Craig version of Casino Royale.
He was great in that, but I got to also say, so many of his films from his native land that he stars in are great. There's one where these guys drink constantly. He's done so much great work. But yeah, he was Le Chiffre in the Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. He's a great Bond villain, man. Great Bond villain.
And you also talked about Rosemead, which was you characterized as powerful and painful, starring Lucy Liu, who you said gave a soul-crushing performance. Now, for me, it may not be the right material for this holiday season.
Oh, no, it is not for the holidays.
But it might be something I'll pick up later on in January, because Lucy Liu has always been a fantastic actress. I thought that a lot of things that she was in, the subject matter was beneath her level of talent, but this seems to rise to that level, you're telling me.
I have to tell you, I live in California, so I do interact with a lot of people from that culture and community, and she plays a certain type of older woman, and she nails it, man. And again, like I said, this is absolutely playing against her glamorous image, but she is terrific in Rosemead.
You answered my question when you started talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night. It's like, I remember that movie from the 1980s, because I didn't know that this was a remake of that. But to your point, it highlights how these movies, in terms of multipliers, it doesn't take a lot of money to produce them. A lot of these companies, they have the IP, so it makes sense to do a remake. And it brings in tens of millions of dollars for relatively little investment, all things considered, as a built-in audience was going to come out to all these movies regardless.
That's true. This is actually a Canadian production, but, it doesn't matter whether it was shot there or here. It's got that kind of a barren, small town vibe that is very much familiar to us from movies of its ilk.
Dead Man's Wire, you could have stopped with Bill Skarsgård and Al Pacino, because those are two actors who I absolutely love. Bill Skarsgård, who is mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time as Pennywise in Welcome to Derry. And I've been watching that and not missing any episodes of that. So, and when you were talking about the description of Dead Man's Wire, and you mentioned Al Pacino, we had mentioned this, it seemed like there was eerily reminiscent, and maybe intentionally so, of how Dog Day Afternoon was laid out. I haven't seen it, but I get a sense that there's some similarities.
Absolutely. And I think Gus Van Sant knew what he was doing when he cast Al Pacino in the role, because I got that vibe. This is set in the 70s. It has that look, art direction wise, and it's the same sort of thing. The siege from Dog Day Afternoon, the guy with the dead man's wire trigger. I thought this was well done. And again, people elsewhere beyond New York and LA will get a chance to see this in January. And I hate to say this phrase, maybe I jumped the gun, but nonetheless, I thought it was good enough and available to some of our listenership.
One More Shot, a time loop rom-com. I've never seen that as combination of genres, but I love time loop movies. For me, it's a not necessarily a trope, but a method of storytelling which has been used many times, and I'm always in. Is it in the vein of like a movie like Snake Eyes with Nicolas Cage?
It really has more of a Groundhog Day vibe in terms of, it's nowhere near the classic and hilarious Groundhog Day, but it does have a situation where someone keeps getting confronted with a chance to repeat a series of events and maybe, I guess, fix their life. That's the phrase I was looking for. And again, I have to say, Emily Browning, is a very, very appealing actress, and so as the center of this, she's pretty good. But I think it kind of is sensible that it's a direct-to-video thing right now here in the States. I believe in Australia, where it was made, it probably played theaters, and it's good, but it's no great shakes. I would say this is a perfect holiday kick back and watch circumstance if you have the opportunity to get it on demand.
Very quickly, Michael Snyder, before I let you go, we had mentioned Bill Skarsgård and how he is also playing Pennywise in every iteration of Stephen King's It, both the movies and also Welcome to Derry. I've been watching that and I've been amazed. I thought it's been fantastic, but I've been amazed and also intrigued at the prospect of how graphic the TV series has been in the depiction of the murder of children. I don't think they could have done this 10, 15 years ago. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And I think Andy Muschietti, who was the guy who directed the two It movies that are, I guess, the best rendering of Stephen King's novel or novella that has come down the pike. He's in charge here, and the cast is great. And one of the more interesting things about Welcome to Derry is that it actually utilizes other aspects of the Kingiverse. I don't know, Stephen King's circumstance with the amazing actor Chris Chalk playing Dick Halloran, who is a very significant character in The Shining as an older man. And this is a prequel to what we've seen of It in prior iterations. And it's set in Derry. I guess it's the early 60s, something to that effect. Does that sound about right to you?
1962.
And there is a military base nearby, and they're trying to figure out what this strange energy is that has been bedeviling the town of Derry for many, many years. And I just thought it was brilliantly done. They have James Remar plays a general in charge of this operation to unearth this power, whatever it is. And we know that it's the power behind Pennywise the clown, who is, of course, the main villain, but is more than what he seems. It's also got a lot of intriguing aspects that are dedicated to addressing the problems of racism that have long dogged this country since slavery. I know it sounds a little highfalutin to suggest it, but that aspect of it is absolutely incisive and impactful, and even makes Welcome to Derry richer than it would have been otherwise. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm really thrilled at the direction it took.
I agree, and it's not gratuitous. It explains a lot of things which happen in America, or it offers an explanation and a justification, and you get to look at, because it runs parallel to actual events in America. I don't want to give away too much as far as the motivation for the federal government to get involved in Derry. That's all I can say.
It's very organic, and addressing the racial divide is very organic, and amazing performances by the kid actors that they found for this thing, and also the grown-ups, some of whom like Bill Skarsgård are on a bit of a roll. And if you wonder, is this guy versatile? Just check out Dead Man's Wire to see how radically different Skarsgård can be from his performance and his chilling, career-defining performance as Pennywise the Clown.
Michael Snyder, I'm sorry that we can't do this every single week, because I thoroughly enjoy this. And your appreciation of cinema seems to be very much in alignment with mine, so it makes it all the more enjoyable. We may not do it again next week because Mark Thompson will be back on Monday, but I'll definitely be tuning in to listen what you have to say each and every week.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure you're putting on me, Mo, but thank you for the kind words. And yeah, man, I feel like we could meet somewhere at a cafe and talk for hours about film and TV. It's always a pleasure, Mo. You're a hell of a broadcaster, and I really appreciate the work you do. For those of you in Los Angeles who want to catch up with my various endeavors, I'll be at Think Space Gallery tomorrow night and going out dancing tomorrow evening at the Panther Club TG in the Atwater Village. Old soul and rock and roll. It's the best, man. And we'll see you next week.
And he's on right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
See you, Michael. And today, but it was well worth it. We had great input from Michael Schur. We had great suggestions from Michael Snyder. We had great news and stories to work with. The chat was very vibrant. We had a number of people who were liking and subscribing and sharing and donating, contributing. It was a wonderful way to end the week.
We've got Harry Magnan who throws in a 5. Oh, my voice sounded distorted there. He said, I always learn something new, but did I need to learn that? I think maybe we were talking about the Trump condoms at the time. I don't know. Thank you, Harry. Citizen Morgan with another 5. Thank you, Brother Mo, for stepping in for Brother Mark again and again and again. Mo, you're a bright light. You're smart and fun, and I loved having you on the show this week. Thank you so much for being here.
Let me be very transparent. When Mark first called me a few weeks ago, I just left KFI, and he's saying, I don't know if you're in a mental headspace where you want to consider this, but hey, would you consider? Let me just first say thank you to Mark Thompson for even thinking of me and putting it on my mind, because I didn't think of this, but I'm so glad that he opened his door and opened up his audience to me. And so I want to say to you, if you're watching right now or listening, thank you, because you didn't have to welcome me, and you've welcomed me in.
Of course.
You didn't have to welcome me, you've welcomed me in. Albert,
thank you. Thank you.
Tony, who's not even here, he's been so accommodating, and because you have been so very good to me, it has allowed me to be the best I can for you.
Awesome. Well, we welcome you back anytime. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Monday on the show, Mark, of course, returns, and we're going to have Gary Dietrich. We'll talk politics with Sarah Kendzior, and Liz Oyer will be on the show. The Oyer lawyer will come back. She's the former U.S. pardon attorney. I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about recent pardons. So again, Gary Dietrich, Sarah Kendzior, Liz Oyer, and Mark Thompson returns. Going to be a great Monday show. But have a great weekend, Mo.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Be safe out there, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.